And on the other hand, economic exclusion, which is at the heart of racism, has been a tool of easy convenience for the majority in our region to use. We seem to deny this ugly reality by only telling the laudable stories of Michigan's abolitionist heritage. We are full of stories of the Underground Railroad. However, there are very few stories about the state's legal exclusion of African Americans in Michigan's first Constitution in 1837. Nor are there narratives which focus on the racial bigotry that early African Americans encountered in Western Michigan. Because our state was an anti-slavery state and the home of the Republican Party, Michigan's own racist past has been too often overlooked. The economic and social fears which excluded African Americans back then continue to be recycled in our public and political deliberations today. The history of Grand Rapids' African American community reveals how detrimental racism is to all of us and how costly it has been to our state. But there is something else that can be learned from African American history for all of us. My deepest convictions in writing this history were to show the humanity of African Americans and to acknowledge a group of people who have too often been left out of the written history of this community. I also wanted to show how a people stood up under the scrutiny of persistent exclusion to fight yet another day. It was important to me to provide young people whom I encounter with a history about African Americans and their great spiritual genius. A genius, I believe, that is important for the world today. My friends, my young friends, African American genius is born of the Spirit. African American strength is born of the Spirit. This spirituality's birth in the tombs of slave ships navigating the Middle Passage taught African Americans something about the long view of history and a philosophy that struggle and sacrifice is necessary to attain human dignity. It is through the many local histories like ours that enable Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to courageously challenge our nation. That tradition held that our humanity is tied inextricably with our fellow human beings. It went something like this: I will not be free until the sister next to me is free. I will not be free until the brother next to me is free. I will not be free until my poor neighbor is free. I will not be free until the baby in its mother's arms is free. It went something like that, and that is the great spiritual genius of our folk. This spiritual tradition is arguably the most valuable thing that African American history offers our world. So let me close with Martin Luther King's memorable words, not from I Have a Dream, but from his very first speech given at the Holt Street Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama on December 5th, 1955. We are here this evening because we are tired now. And I want to say that we are not advocating violence. We have never done that. And I want it to be known throughout Montgomery and throughout this nation that we are Christian people. We believe in the Christian religion. We believe in the teachings of Jesus. The only weapon that we have in our hands this evening is the weapons of protest. That's all. And then toward the end of that speech, he goes and he says, and as we stand and sit here this evening, And as we prepare ourselves for what lies ahead, let us go out with the grim and bold determination that we're going to stick together. We're going to work together right here in Montgomery. And when the history books are written in the future, somebody will say, there lived a race of people, a black people, fleecy locks and black complexion, a people who had the moral courage to stand up for their rights, and thereby they injected a new meaning into the veins of history and of civilization. And we're going to do that. God grant that we will do it before it's too late. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to take a few questions for Dr. Jelks. I was instructed to instruct you that we want questions, we encourage questions, we want a strong dialogue, but we want no speeches. So if we can proceed, anybody with a question, they'll be recognized, and if they can't be heard, I will repeat the question so everybody can hear on the microphone. Are there any questions for Dr. Jelks? Stand, please. The question is, what are we going to do today from this point forward?
Thank you, Commissioner Mayu. I'm a historian and not, so I look back. I will leave that great challenge to you all to look forward, but I do look back. So if it's not 100 years ago, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Any more questions for Dr. Jelks? Can you please stand?
I've lived in the city for 61 years, and I've seen an awful lot of change. But today, I think, there's a different kind of discrimination, and it's economic justice. There's very few businesses, if any major businesses, that are owned by blacks in this city.
The question is about economic discrimination.
Economic discrimination was, as I tried to say in my talk, is a part of the state's and the country's history. And I think that we don't want to admit that. That's a large part. I mean, that to discriminate against people from getting housing loans, those things are still going on, business loans, and that we have to organize effectively to combat that. I was just told a very chilling story the other day about someone who makes $200,000 a year, went to get a business loan, and it took a local bank more than 5 months to make that loan to the person. This person who told me this was white, who said, I had no credit, and I went in the bank and got a similar loan, a line of credit in a day. So we do have to address those kinds of issues.
The gentleman right here in the middle.